You're listening to Mystic Lounge with Alan B. Smith. Rebroadcast on the Onyx Network. Thursdays at 11 p.m. Pacific. Fridays at 2 a.m. Eastern.
However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Mystic Lounge. I'm Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host. Tonight we have a fantastic guest, Michelle Clare. Michelle connects to spirit to provide people with profound, detailed life insights. She's a certified medium, psychic, energy healer, life coach, and frequent speaker show guest. Michelle also works as a research medium for the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the IONS. We like their work. Michelle survived 3 near-death experiences, NDEs, within an 11-year span, April 2000 to May 2006, and a pivotal event in November 2011. That resulted in a traumatic brain injury. These pivotal events, plus 2 shared experiences, SDEs, which is a new subject that I'm very excited to discuss on Mystic Lounge, have expanded her own awareness and fueled her desire to help others. Her website is michelleclaire.net. We'll bring Michelle on in just a moment. As a friendly reminder, this show is rebroadcast on the UNX network Friday nights at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 p.m. Pacific Time. And of course, it's posted the following morning on all major podcasts where you can catch it. So if you listen on podcasts or here on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'd really appreciate any support you can give the channel. We are growing steadily, so I really appreciate all of you. So let's bring our esteemed guest, Michelle Clare. Michelle, how are you?
Hello, I'm wonderful. How are you this evening?
Good. Thank you. Welcome to Mystic Lounge.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Well, I think it's fair to put you in the category of mystic to some degree, right?
Right.
With this many near-death experiences. Before we dive into that, can you tell us a little bit about where you come from a spiritual perspective before all these events happened?
Yeah. So I was raised Catholic. I remember the first time that I felt like maybe this wasn't the right religion for me was when I was in first grade and my dog died, and my Sunday school teacher told me that my dog didn't go to heaven because it didn't have a soul. And I remember feeling devastated because I was sure my beautiful little dog went to heaven, right? So at a young age, I kind of started realizing that I had this connection, I would say, to source. I don't even want to say it was angels or anything. It was just like a knowing that that's what they think, but I don't believe that's true. So I started to kind of navigate what the Catholic religion said was true and what felt true to me. Many of the good things, though, that came from it were that I was exposed to angels and saints. And so I was raised to believe I had all these beings of light that wanted to help me. And if I lost my whatever, I would pray to St. Anthony. And if my dog was sick, I'd pray to St. Francis. So, I mean, that was the good part of it for me. You are muted, Alan.
Sorry about that. If you have some doubts about the religion itself, did you still actually literally believe in the saints themselves as entities?
You know what I did? It took me until my near-death experiences to really think about beings of light as energy, or like how we are, right? So I did know that they had been human at some point in time. And in my mind, they were still that human form in that heavenly realm. But what I've come to find years later after these experiences and after all of my mediumship is we are all supported by these higher energies or these beings of light. And a lot of times they're not really worried about what we call them. So very often someone will say, Michelle, what is my life guide's name? And I'll say, today I can't get a name for you, but name your life guide. They're going to be like your puppy. They don't care what you name it. You've just given it a vibrational frequency to respond to you on. So I found that that really seems to be true when I'm working, that sometimes I don't know the exact, is this, which is the angel assist? What is this angel's names? But I know the frequency and the vibration. When I'm working and I have saints come in, very often I don't necessarily think that they are this saint for all of eternity, right? But the energy of that saint will come through, and I'll be able to say, oh, I have Mother Teresa coming in.
Yeah, well, we do have some understanding that, at least in theoretical quantum physics, and some actual tangible physics, that data doesn't really disappear.
Right.
We don't know how to kind of bring it back into its original form, but our existence is in some form of like a data. If we think of like ones and zeros, continue on. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so is that what you're communicating with it, or like when we're communicating with a spirit or something other? Is it really just kind of a part of a greater consciousness, or are they actually still like a separate being, like the way we consider ourselves kind of individual?
Okay, so I am going to show you this beautiful picture behind me.
Okay.
It's actually much prettier in person. It's got all of these little sparkles on it. It reminds me of the light when I was in heaven. But really, what this reminds me of is two things. One, it reminds me of our soul. So each time our soul chooses to come in and have another lifetime, it creates another ray of light. So the ray of light that is Michelle will always exist as the ray of light is Michelle. And next time I come in, I will add a ray of light. With that being said, this picture also reminds me of the oneness. So think of each one of those rays of light, that soul that's connected to all of these versions of Michelle is also connected to the oneness. So if there's a God source, divine energy that we're going to use these terms for, it really is this connection to the oneness.
Does Michelle or the individual continue on infinitely?
Yeah, to some extent, because when I am connecting with people's loved ones in spirit, their grandma or somebody that they recognize in their family will come through. So obviously, there's part of that energy that still exists. Now, if I was reading for someone and their grandma from 2000 lifetimes ago came in and I was like, oh, I have this person, they'd be like, who are you talking about? That's not my grandma,
Yeah.
right? But the piece that is their grandma will always be that piece.
That's an interesting way to put it together. So we want to talk about your near-death experiences and the shared death experience, but what do you think is best for us to start with? Do you want to start with your near-death experiences? Because the shared death experience is a new topic for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start with my near death
Okay.
experiences. Okay. So I've had three. I will give you a little bit of a background. When I was 12, raised Catholic, as I had said, when I was 12, my grandfather had transitioned, and I realized that he and I were still communicating. So I would tell my mom, Grandpa says, and she would say, well, that's what you think he would say if he was still here. So I kind of learned that no one else was having these conversations with Grandpa. So I kind of started to keep it to myself.
Gotcha.
My grandma transitions a few years later, similar story. So I'm aware that I have some level of communication that not everyone appears to have, but I really don't do anything about it. I don't have the words for mediumship. And actually, even through my three near-death experiences, I don't even know their near-death experiences. I just know their experiences. It wasn't a term that was in my vocabulary. So to set the stage for my first near-death experience, I had just been married a few years. I didn't have any children. We were in the hospital that day. It was in April 2000 to watch my sister-in-law. She had just had a baby. So we were visiting her and the baby. I was actually in the hallway talking to her RN, who was my friend from high school. And what happened was I had a seizure. And when I had this seizure, obviously my body hit the floor. But what I remember is opening my eyes, and I was laying with my head in my grandma's lap. And my grandma was the youngest, healthiest version of her that I could remember seeing. And I noticed the immense love, the blissful energy around us, this timeless sense. And then I realized that I was in what appeared to be a room with white walls. And these walls were alive and breathing. So each cell or molecule was radiating this light and love. And although they appeared solid, they were alive.
Okay.
And as I was laying there, I look up next to my grandma, and there is this 12-foot angel. And this angel's presence was immense, and it just almost pulls you in and energetically hugs you. And I remember thinking that I wanted to see her feather wings, right? Because we all know angels have feather wings. And as I went to look for them, what I realized was that her wings were made of light. And they reminded me of the pictures I've seen of the aurora borealis, where they kind of would move with that energy, and they just seemed to span eternity.
Interesting.
So
So you're looking at this light, but the light seems to like extend into eternity.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so as I'm laying there, I'm thinking in my head, I'm thinking, what is your name? And she answers me and she says, my name's Madeline. I'm one of your guardian angels. And I was quite surprised because I didn't know about telepathic communication at that point in time. So I didn't know that she could hear what I was thinking. But I'm just really laying in this beautiful, blissful energy, feeling more love than I had ever felt in my life, not worried about the time. The next thing I know, I hear someone yelling, code, code, code. And I had quit breathing. And because I was already in the hospital, they were calling the code team.
Mhm.
So the next thing I know, I'm shoved back in my body. And it did feel like I got shoved in. Like it was, my body felt too small for where I had been, and like getting shoved into jeans that don't fit.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then the next thing I realized was just how heavy and dense everything was. I went from feeling like a feather floating into this heavy energy of like density cement. My arm felt like it weighed 500 pounds. And so at that point in time, they admitted me into the hospital, and they were never able to come up with why I had the seizure. So I had never had one before or had one since.
Is that a novel description of near-death experiences? The sense of feeling shoved back into a body that doesn't fit?
Yeah, you know,
I haven't
yeah.
heard that much, to be honest.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that some NDEers will say that. And a lot of times you'll at least hear them talk about how heavy and dense it feels when they come back.
Yes. Yeah.
But that was kind of what I felt like. I felt like I was trying to put on a pair of jeans that I outgrew as a kid, like getting shoved back in my body. And it was
Yeah.
so heavy. And oh, what am I doing here?
Well, yeah, but with the jeans, you want to be like, I want to get this thing off. But with your body, how did you feel? Were you like,
Yeah.
were you comfortable with
No,
that?
it was uncomfortable for a little bit. It
Mhm.
literally felt like it took me time to acclimate to being in a body again. I would like to say this. I perceived myself as having a body in that heavenly realm. Remember, I said my head was in my grandma's lap. Like I perceived that I had a body, but it was just featherweight, and it felt light and fluffy. And then to come back into this density, it was intense.
I had an experience once where I was just walking, and this was actually in high school. And we were in a gym, and all of a sudden, I'm talking to someone, and all of a sudden, it felt like I was out of the body looking down,
Mhm.
and it was very brief. And then I was like, "Phoom," and then I was back in again. And that was the only time I've ever had that experience.
Wow.
Do you see a correlation between the kind of spontaneous out of body experiences and near death experiences?
Well, yeah. I mean, the correlation is that they're both out of body experiences, right? Usually, OBEs or out of body experiences are not always caused by trauma. Sometimes people have them when they're doing psychedelics or, different experiences like that. Sometimes people have them in meditation, right? So it just kind of depends. But to me, they're similar. I've had one out of body experience when my friend was working on me doing healing energy. There were no psychedelics involved or anything like that. Um, and as that happened, I really was taken back into that unconditional light, that beautiful love and bliss. And I literally I said, this was after my 3 NDEs, by the way. I said, may I please stay? And the answer was no. And once again, I got shoved back into my heavy, dense body.
Wow. Okay, so this thing about light, I've heard different descriptions of the light. Mindy Toutfest, who is the director of the MUFON University Mutual UFO Network, she discussed seeing something like a pink light, and it was kind of like this central, almost like abstract shape. Uh, Have you seen shapes, or is it always sort of like a pinpoint light coming out?
Um, I love that you're asking that. When I'm in the light, it actually is all encompassing. So it would be like going outside and standing in a bright, sunny day. It's all around you. I don't see it as a pinpoint. And in none of my NDEs did I ever see a tunnel. A lot of times we'll hear about people seeing a tunnel of light coming for them. And that just hasn't been an experience that I've had. I'm always all completely in the light.
What about now?
What about now?
Yeah.
You know what? Yes, I
Yeah,
actually I would say yes, but I'm having my human experience at the same time. And there
Mhm.
is a difference between being in the light in that heavenly realm where you can release your humanness
Mhm.
versus being in the light on planet Earth. And you can be in the light in both places,
Yeah.
but it feels very different.
Yeah, and just speaking from a psychological perspective, having a mindset is really important. How much of the work, the spiritual work, is psychological versus tapping into some higher realm?
Mhm. For me, I feel like the majority of it is the higher realm. I mean, I've got to be in the right frame of mind when I'm working for myself or working with clients, right? We all know, even if you're somebody who meditates, if you're having a really bad day and it's hard to get yourself kind of in alignment, it's a little bit more of a challenge. So for me, it's really been about training myself over the years to be able to enter that state very rapidly, to be able to go into the readings and connect with spirit and source and that higher level of information. And very often what I love about this is when I'm connecting with someone's spirit team, they know the person, I don't, so they are giving them the guidance, the answers, the direction, the navigational tools that this individual needs. It's not something that human Michelle would have thought of. Like, I could give you my best advice, but
Mhm.
it's not going to be nearly as good as your life guides or your loved ones coming in.
Okay. And if anyone's just tuning in now, you can find out more about Michelle at michelleclaire.net. So, what about your other near death experience?
So my next one happened in April of 2000. Actually, it
Mhm.
was May of 2000. And at that point in time, I now had three little kids. I had a 5-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and my son was 6 weeks old. So I had him on April 1st, and I had many complications. So for about 6 weeks after I had him, the majority of that time I was in and out of the hospital, mostly in, and then I'd come home for 2 days and then be back in. So finally, the doctors decided they needed to do a DNC, which is a procedure where they clear out the uterus. And they said this will be a 45-minute outpatient procedure. You'll be fine. This is going to cure your problems. You can go home. And I was quite exhausted and ready for this process to be done. So the night before, I just had a pit in my stomach and I felt like I shouldn't do it. But they had reassured me it'd be quite easy. So I went in. And I had anesthesia before. And whenever I've had it, it's really just a blank space. I'm not remembering, I'm not dreaming. There's just nothing there. So I remember counting backwards for the anesthesiologist.
Mhm.
The next thing I know, I am laying on the gurney, and my beautiful 102-pound white German Shepherd that had passed away a couple years before walks into the operating room, lays her head on my gurney, and we are gone. And we are on this amazing beach. And on this beach, there are colors that we don't have here, emotions, sight, sound, smells, everything, every drop of water in the ocean, every piece of sand, every flower radiating this light and love from inside. I'm looking at my beautiful dog. She looks like she's about 2 years old.
Yeah.
We are telepathically communicating. She's so happy I'm there. She's glowing. I mean, I can just feel her love for me, my love for her. And we are running on this beach. And what I notice after a while is that we don't get hot or tired or thirsty. The sand feels like clouds. And so then I start to realize, like, wow, this is different. And not just that, there's that blissful, unconditional love around me. So when I'm on the beach with her, what happens is I become aware that my son, who was 6 weeks old and at home with my mom, is calling to me, and he's scared because he knows that I'm getting ready to leave. So in this near death experience, what I realize is our soul can be in more than one place at a time. Part of my soul goes to my son, And I said to him, I said, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you. I will find a way to stay. And I didn't know what to do or how that was going to happen. So I started praying and I just started saying, it's not my time. I need help. My kids still need me here. The next thing I know, I'm transported back into the operating room. Jesus comes in, and Jesus came in very much feeling like my best friend, not saying bow down to me or pray to me or confess your sins. He comes in as my best friend. I see the operating room light up with this beautiful golden white light. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in post-op, and my 45-minute procedure had turned into a 3.5-hour emergency surgery because they had ruptured my uterus in multiple places and they missed an artery by literally a millimeter.
That it's really saddening to hear these kind of stories. It seems to happen far too often. What did you do after that? I mean, you had this profound experience, but okay, so now you also have this other issue with dealing with the hospital and the doctors and your health.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened, the infection then got pushed into my body cavity. So then I was running fevers and in the hospital even longer.
Yep.
So I had quite the physical trauma from this. And what happens with this experience is all I know is it's a very vivid experience. I know it was real, but I don't know it's near-death experience. Don't really know who I can talk to about this. As a lot of people will say who have NDEs, they're like, who do you tell, right? And so anyways, I end up being in the hospital, I believe, for another 10 days or so after that. I finally get home. I have an infant, a 2.5-year-old, a 5-year-old. It takes me at least 4 months to get back to 80% ability of functioning just because of what my body had gone through with the trauma. So I really now have, I would say, a stronger intuition and more connection to spirit world, but I don't do anything with it. I'm kind of in survival mode with these 3 little kids, and I'm a stay-at-home mom and married. And so there isn't anything that I do with it at that point in time.
So that third event triggered what you might call like a psychic ability.
It did. It is really the one that just kind of broke me open, for lack of a better word.
And so what was the first moment that happened? You thought, oh my gosh, this is strange that I have this intuition or sense.
From the third near-death experience or the second?
The first one that you ever had, where you thought, oh, something is different about my mind.
Yeah. So with that, it was just that I really started to become more aware of angels, and I felt more connected to my grandma, or like the mediumship between myself and my loved ones seemed to flow even more smoothly.
So interesting. It's like the mediumship with the loved ones earlier was kind of almost priming you for that. Like it's like practice almost.
Exactly. Yeah. So it wouldn't seem so foreign.
Interesting. So when were you in this world, right? And you had a moment and you're like, oh my gosh, I predicted something or I connected to someone consciously or whatever it might be.
I would say that started when my grandfather passed, but it's not until my third near-death experience in November of 2011 that after that is when I start getting information for other people that is really kind of out of my league, is how I would have described it at the time.
Yeah. I have a comment here from Charles Smar. Hey, Charles, good to see you. He's a regular. He says, in the process, you learn that the ones to tell, referring who do you tell when you have this experience, are all the others who have been there. And, and that's what you're doing. So who did you talk to? Who did you talk to first?
So I shared these experiences with my mom, and my mom, it wasn't that she didn't believe me. She just didn't understand them. And this was at a point in time before Google was everywhere and you could start putting this stuff in and pulling up all the information, right? So, I mean, my mom understood and believed, but she didn't know what to make of it. So I really just kind of carried this within myself. My husband at the time was not open to things like this. I think they kind of confused him and maybe made him a little bit fearful. So it was almost just this gift that I carried within.
And so what do you do now with the gift?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about my third NDE, because that's what really launched me into
All right.
the mediumship. So from the second one, I do nothing. I go back, I be mom. I have a higher maybe intuitive ability, but I really don't do anything. And then my third one comes in November of 2011. So 11 for people who like numbers. And at that point, my kids are 10 and 8 and 5, and I have 14-foot ceilings in my house. So I am up about 12 feet off the ground. I have battery operated candles, and I tell my younger two kids, as soon as I get done putting this candle up, we're going to go get your sister from school. And so I climb up the ladder. As I'm getting towards the top, I feel it start to shift, and I literally think, oh, this is going to hurt. And at that moment, I am ripped out of my body, not in a painful way, but like bungee cord fast kind of way.
Okay.
And I am turned around facing my body in the ladder, suspended in the air. And I'm standing with these three people that I don't know, but they feel like they are either very close family or friends. I feel like I've known them my whole life. There's an Asian man, a Hawaiian man, and an Egyptian woman. And they're standing there with me, and I'm looking at the ladder and my body like a freeze frame in a movie, knowing that they're going to hit the floor in a second. And they said to me, these three people, they said, what would you like to do? Would you like to stay or go? And as they say this, I see another angel come in. And this is not the same angel from my first near-death experience.
Okay.
This angel is dressed in red and gold. And as soon as I see this angel, I know that it is here to either take me home to that heavenly realm or shift something so that I can stay. So I'm sitting in this beautiful, loving, blissful, no time space. And I'm kind of trying to figure out how I have forever to decide if I want to stay or go when I know my body's going to hit the floor in less than a second. And I was wondering, honestly, I'm like, how come they're not rushing me? Like, you would think they'd be like, hurry up. What do you want to do? No, I had forever to decide. So as I look, I see my two younger kids right there in the kitchen. And when I see my kids, I know that I need to stay. So the minute that I make the decision to stay, I am downloaded with information, and the information is okay, but now you've got to go back and you've got to be a medium, and you've got to help people in the way that you can help them. They told me that my marriage would most likely end in divorce, that there would be more trauma later on in my life. And a lot of information still is revealed because there was so much at that point in time. I don't think my humanness could comprehend it all. But I remember making a conscious decision to come back, even knowing that I was told things would get challenging at certain points in time. So I end up falling, and what happens is I hit the back of my head on the corner of my granite island. So I had a 5.5-inch skull fracture. I had a brain bleed. I lost my taste, my smell, my equilibrium, part of my hearing. But what they figured out was I survived the fall by 1/2 inch. Literally, I missed my brainstem by 1/2 inch, which was how much that angel had moved my head.
That is insane. And one wonders, how could you possibly imagine that? Like, let's assume the angels aren't real, right? So
Right.
the skeptical approach would be, okay, what could have happened? I mean, how does that happen? Could you imagine something like being moved just so when you're in a situation when you're falling like that within less than a split second?
Right. Right. Or how could I get out and see my body frozen in time like it was with the ladder? The really interesting thing too, for anyone who's ever had a traumatic brain injury, oh, there's a lot to get over. I couldn't even sit up. Sometimes I couldn't see. Sometimes I couldn't write my name. It wasn't a place where you could go off into imagine this daydream world when you have
Yeah.
a traumatic brain injury.
How long was the recovery?
So I was in the hospital about 10 days,
Okay.
but the recovery took a long time. I'm actually still in cranial sacral therapy, and that was years ago. So there's still a process of healing. I think our bodies always want to heal. But I would say after a couple years, things were pretty good for me. I would just start to have vertigo sometimes, which is still an issue I have.
When you have these experiences, it's the sudden onset of some sort of consciousness or entering into another realm that's very sudden. Afterwards, and the only parallel I can make this to would be like when people say that they did a lot of LSD when they were younger, and then they would just get these sort of like random moments of like, seeing trails or lights and things like that. Do you have sort of echo moments um, of the event later?
I do. And one of the things that will always take me back to that unconditional loving space will be if I'm outside and there are leaves on a tree and kind of like the wind is blowing. And you know how if the sun is right behind it, it looks like the leaf is lighting up from within?
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever I see that, or sometimes I'll see that with blades of grass, it literally takes me back into that unconditional, blissful, timeless space.
Interesting. And what is that space?
That would be what I call our heavenly realm. But I feel like that isn't really complete when I say that, because what it is it's so much more than that. It's not a place where you go if you're good or you get locked out of if you're bad. It's really a space of unconditional love. And most people who've had near death experiences will call it home, because it is, when you are in that energy, it is more like being at home than you've ever been in your life.
It's so funny because my wife and I were just watching this interview with Matt Damon and Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert asked him, what do you think happens to you after death? And he says, I go home.
Yeah.
There is this overwhelming sense of home from all near death, or 90 some percent of near death experiencers. I know there are some who do have kind of almost hell like or very scary experiences. How do you because you've worked with ions,
Mhm.
how do you reconcile that with your own experience?
Right. So, what I have found, and because I was raised Catholic, because I believe in Jesus, because I believe in angels, right? That heavenly realm is always made from love and compassion, and it's going to tend to greet us in the way that we expect it. So for me, if let's say, Buddha showed up, I might have been like, huh, who are you? Right? Because I wasn't raised with that. I was raised with Jesus, right? So I feel like part of this is created by our soul
Mhm.
in what we believe we're going to experience. So if somebody is transitioning and they believe they're going to heaven and it is an island, they are going to find this beautiful island and this water. If they believe it's mountains or streams or whatever, they're going to find this, because that
Mhm.
energy of heaven is all about love and compassion and welcoming them in. Now, sometimes when people are transitioning, they have a feeling of, I'm not worthy, I was a bad human, I'm going to go to hell, whatever their ideas are. And so, in an interesting way, they create an uncomfortable reality that they step into. But
Mhm.
here's what we know: most of the NDEers who have had a negative experience, I think there's another word they use for it than negative. But anyway, who've had an experience that wasn't all light and love, what we find is that while they're in this experience, they will always say, and then the hand of God came in and pulled me out, or I saw the light. So what happens is
Interesting.
somebody might transition in their mind in a way that they're expecting something negative, but the beings of light are always holding space around them so that they can move into what would feel better and much more comfortable.
So it's not necessarily hell, like a place hell, but something like the dark night of the soul, going into the abyss,
Mhm.
and so that you can learn something about yourself, and then you're pulled out of it.
Yeah. There's no such thing as being sentenced to any of those frequencies or vibrations for eternity. It would be an experience, but even when I'm working with spirit, they've made it clear to me that they're always holding space around every soul. So whether we're aware of it or not, we have this team of beings of light, angels, life guides, loved ones who've transitioned before us, that are always holding the space for me, Michelle, to show up as my highest, best self. That's true here on earth, and that will be true when I leave my body.
Do you have any foresight of what your own life? Because you mentioned something about seeing, I think, your own death. Um,
I haven't seen that, but what I do know is that I'm here for quite a while. Everything that I've been told, I think I'm going to be in my 90s when I transition. And just going off of the 3 near-death experiences that I've had, they've all happened so quick. I believe that my 4th and last time will be quick, and I will be out.
yes. Well, I hope for all of us it's quick.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So shared death experience. Now we really have to dive into this. Uh, I guess my general take on that is that multiple people are are in the near death experience, but they're aware of each other.
Yeah, so there's a couple. Well, I've had 2, and I'll explain those with you. But shared death experiences are when we have somebody who is transitioning, and then there is somebody who is healthy with them. So either you're sitting with a loved one at hospice or whatever this situation is.
Mhm.
So the shared death experience is actually for the one who is healthy. And what happens is sometimes we will
I
see
see.
this as maybe they're sitting with grandma and they see like a beautiful light leave her body, or the curtains quietly, gently move as she transitions, right? All the way up to people who have said they've seen their loved one's life review. Now, there's a common theme with the people who get the shared death experience. They are usually left with a lot of peace because they know and they feel and they see that their loved one is okay.
And how do we know for a fact that it's shared?
Well, because we know we have one person experiencing it, or one soul experiencing it, and another soul, which would be almost like a tag along energy, getting to experience it too.
And they confirm this with each other.
Well, a lot of times there's not confirmation
Okay.
because the one soul is
Is
transitioning out of
already
their
just
body.
gotcha. Okay. So they're not on the precipice, and then they kind of enter into this realm, come back to life, and then they can confirm it, and then actually complete the transition. It's a full transition, and so
Correct.
really you're left with the one person that's alive, that's with them, that
Right.
suddenly has this consciousness, uh,
Mhm.
awareness of the other side or whatever's happening.
Absolutely. And
And how
you'll
do we know,
find
like, it's not their mind sort of giving themselves a form of comfort?
Well, it could be, but a lot of times they are shown things that they wouldn't have known before.
Mhm.
And it's really hard. Like, I can tell you, imagine the most loved you've ever felt in your whole life. And you can go back to whatever that moment was, just like I can in my human existence. And it still doesn't compare to that heavenly love that you feel in
Mm.
a near death experience.
Which it totally it agrees with near-death experiencers' reports, is that it's an overwhelming love that nothing can compare to.
Exactly. So when you have a human who feels that while they are
Mhm.
sitting there healthy with no physical trauma, when grandma's transitioning, it changes their life.
Gotcha. And so for you, what did you see?
So for me, my first shared death experience was actually with one of my beautiful dogs. And she was here at the house.
Mhm.
She had lymphoma. And so the vet had come over to euthanize her. And my mom had already transitioned at this point in time. And I was working as a medium. But there was no part of me being a medium that morning. I was laying on the ground next to her in my pajamas, crying, and the vet gave her the anesthesia. And then, as I was just hugging her and holding her, I felt her soul gently detach from her body like a feather on the wind.
Mm.
And in that moment, I heard my mom say, "I have her now." And then, about 30 seconds later, the vet listened to her heart and said she was gone. But I had felt this beautiful, gentle detaching. I heard my mom's voice. I felt the love that she was in. And
Mhm.
so that was very peaceful and calming for me because I knew where she was and I knew who had her. The other near death experience that just happened very recently. It was just this January of 2024. And at this point in time, I was actually at the salon getting my hair done, and I was back under the dryer. And my lady comes back and she says, "Oh, we have a guy out front who's passed out. We had to call 911." And as I'm getting up and walking towards the front of the building, I hear spirit say fentanyl overdose. And I can start to feel this man's energy around me. And as I get up to the front of the building, The police are pulling up. They're starting to work on him. There's really nothing for me to do, but I can feel his soul. By this time, I also do know this is a shared death experience because I'm familiar with these. So I know what's happening. So I'm calling in the light, calling in the angels for him, for the first responders, just kind of holding that space. But he was not planning on leaving. This was not him ending his life. This was an oops. And so there was a little bit of confusion around him. And so what happened was his soul and mind kind of linked in. So at some point I go back and sit down in her chair. They've loaded him up in the ambulance. They're driving him to the hospital. And I can feel that he is coding, and I can feel that they are paddling his chest. And with that, it was as if I was right there in the ambulance with them. And as I'm sitting in this energy for a little bit, what happens then, I'm still, praying and calling in that light. I feel him disconnect and I feel him move into that heavenly realm. So I know that he transitioned to the other side. Now, I didn't know his name. I wasn't family. I couldn't call the hospital to confirm this, but there was a very strong knowing. And I literally felt his soul release from his body.
Do people who have shared death experiences, do they have their own experiences first? Does it prime you to have a shared death experience, or can anyone have a shared death experience?
Anyone can have a shared death experience. And there's actually a place in Santa Barbara, a clinic, where if you have a loved one who is terminally ill, you can go there and they train you how to have a shared death experience with your loved one.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yes. You should look into William Peters. He's the founder of all of this.
William Peters. Wow. Okay. So I guess, there are people who train for, to improve their psychic mediumship or psychic abilities. Is it akin to that?
I believe it would be similar, because what
you're like, I can do it. I don't need to know.
Well, I think it would be similar, because what you're doing is, even with humans, right? We're all on vibrational frequencies. There's some people we resonate with more than others, right? I mean, just it's a vibrational frequency. So what we're really, I'm assuming, I have not gone through the training, but the way I would perceive it is we're really unifying this vibrational frequency between these two people or these two souls, so that as that one is getting ready to transition, the other one, for lack of a better word, gets to go along for the ride.
That's a pretty cool ride.
Yeah.
So of these shared death experiences, have we had any of the dark shared death experiences?
Not that I'm aware of.
Interesting.
And that would, so with the gentleman who had the fentanyl overdose, I could feel his confusion because he wasn't planning on leaving his body that day. But on a soul level, that he gravitated right to me and knew that I would be able to call in the light and hold that space for him, not knowing whether he would transition or not. So there's more going on than just our humanness, right? Like, our souls do know when they're going to exit our bodies. And in a lot of times, depending on our life plan and what we want to experience, they will set that up so that they are also, our soul is growing, learning, and evolving in the way that it wanted to in this lifetime.
So I'm a big fan of the Matrix. The fourth film in the series was very punk and meta, and it really wasn't that great of a film, and it was almost designed not to be. On the one hand, I understand what Lana Wachowski was going for. On the other hand, it's like, people paid tickets for this; they shouldn't have to. But there were some really good aspects to it. I just heard in the news yesterday that they're going to actually do, not the Wachowskis, but they're going to help produce a new Matrix. I think with the continuum of certain characters, and even after the last movie totally bombed, there still is this desire, this draw to something like the Matrix. And I wonder, is it kind of reflecting our reality? I mean, do you think that there's any chance we're in some sort of simulation-like reality?
I absolutely do.
Oh, really?
I do.
And how do you conceive of that?
Okay. So for me, what happened was I had this connection with spirit during meditation, and
Mhm.
spirit said to me, Michelle, you ran this lifetime in simulation 100 times before you would come in. So what it told me was that my soul or your soul, who any of our souls, this is not just special to mine,
Mhm.
like it's like being in that driver's ed simulator in high school, right? So
Okay.
I did this little simulator, and I wanted to I said, "Oh, that was great. Okay, now I want to take on a body and do that." There's a difference when you're driving the car from the simulator to actually being on the freeway driving the car, right?
Yeah.
So although I have upped the game and I've made it more real than the simulator,
Mhm.
my soul knows this is a simulation. We don't die. So I am here to have this experience in the contrast, but I'm not really going to die when this is over, and neither are you.
Interesting. Okay, so if I can think of a metaphor, so those of us who are old enough to remember, so when I was in high school, we had a simulator class, but it's not like simulators like we think of today, right? It was like a projection
Right.
of driving on the wall, and then you had this little machine with a steering wheel. It didn't matter what you did; it didn't change the screen because it was you and like six other people,
Yeah.
all in these little simulators. But the idea was to acclimate you, so that when you get to the road, it's less shocking. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes. So my understanding from spirit is that there is a way to have a simulation of this lifetime before we come in, or simulate it many, many times. And then we go ahead and we take the next step in the simulation, which is like getting in the car and driving down the freeway. However, in the grand scheme of things, that's still a simulation. It's just a more intense version.
What are the tenets of living that you think are the most important spiritually?
Hmm. The most important things for spiritual living?
Mhm.
That's a great question. Boy, it's hard to choose just a couple. I mean, I think number one, when we come in as a soul to this human form, we actually do come to learn and play and grow. And what happens is we get caught up in life and we forget a lot of times that we're actually a spiritual being playing human. We're
Mhm.
not a human. And so when we tap back into the wholeness of who we are and the fact
Mhm.
that none of us are living this life alone, we all have spirit teams, we all chose to be here. So no one is accidentally on planet Earth. Then all of a sudden it becomes an empowering story where it's not what happened to me, it's how this happened and I overcame it or moved through it or the lesson I learned from it. It's about opportunities
Mhm.
and growth, not about being victimized.
So gratitude. I think I heard that in there somewhere.
Hmm.
Do you feel how important do you think that is?
Number one.
Okay. That's how I feel. Not silly gratitude, not I'm gonna let people abuse me and I'm just gonna be happy about life just because. But very specific gratitude, I feel works very effectively.
Hmm.
Just think of like very specific things that it's like, you know what? Despite all the crap that I'm going through right now, I have these things, and that's so amazing.
Yeah, heartfelt gratitude. It's
Right.
truly in your heart.
Mhm. What are the things you're most grateful for?
Oh my gosh, my kids. I
Yeah.
mean, and at the same time, those kids keep me coming back. I had a couple chances to leave, but I think that
That's
was
good.
my,
Yeah.
you know, I'm so grateful for my kids. I'm so grateful for my friends and my family. Like, really, I have so much to be grateful for. But the most important thing to me are these amazing connections that I have with these other souls. Because that is really what this life is about. Now, there's nothing wrong with having the big house and the fast car and whatever. Like, that's okay. That's part of playing on planet Earth.
Mhm.
I'm not somebody who sees any problems with that. But you just have to know at the end of the day that what you take with you is the love and the memories. You're not taking the car or the house or any of that. And so we come here to learn and play and grow and realize what it's like to find other souls that we can communicate with and that truly get us. And that's really a gift.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that sometimes you can be detracted by, and this is how I feel, by zealousy and belief systems, because those are almost sort of like operating programs that can trump your free mind,
Right.
to live spiritually freely in the way that you're kind of meant to. Um, how do you feel about religion and dogma versus spiritual living?
Okay, so I'm actually okay with religion,
Okay.
as long as you're not hurting anyone or killing someone in the name of your God or your beliefs,
Mhm.
because what I think is we are on a planet that has about 8 billion people here. Each one of them has their own reality, their own soul plan. And really, some of them come to see, what is it like to be Catholic? What is it like to be Jewish? What is it like to choose to find God, source, the divine in this way? And so, as long as you are actually being here from a place of love and loving people, it doesn't matter which avenue you take to get to God. And so, I don't actually have an issue with that. Now, I have a hard time when we use it to separate each other from separate us from each other, or to say, oh well, I'm better because I'm this religion, you're not going to heaven, or I mean, those are the problems with religion, is that we've used them to separate. But the truth is, if everybody really lived in love and kindness, it doesn't matter what your religion is.
The the Bible, as far as I can understand, I think there's something like 9 different levels of angels or something like that. There's like 9 types of angels. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
wrong on the number. Maybe it's 7. Um, have you seen different types of entities at all?
Of entities or angels?
Oh, good question. Let's start with angels.
Okay. Yeah. So with angels, I'm very familiar with three. So I see like a cherub type angel,
Uh-huh.
I see a guardian angel, and then I see the archangels. So those are the three that I'm most familiar with. There was one other one that actually I was just reading for a gentleman about a month ago. And this angel, I had never seen one like it before. It was almost completely golden. And what I
Hmm.
would say was, this angel was like the keeper of his Akashic record. It was one I had never seen before. And it was almost as though when I was feeling into that energy, this angel was created specifically as a perfect vibrational match for this soul's Akashic record.
Interesting. And then cherub, we're not talking about like the little babies, right? With the
No,
wings, right?
I
But
see them as smaller, but I see them as they're here to bring joy. They're here to
okay.
bring, a lot of times I'll see them around animals, because like
Mhm.
when we look at animals tend to be happy and find contentment and peace. And when I see them during readings, I know that this is either a joyful person or this person needs to find more joy.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. But the play thing, mammals do that, but then we see that in other species too. And I understand evolutionary, like all the explanations, and it totally makes sense. But it really is a beautiful thing to watch,
Mhm.
especially when you see like a cross species, like a deer and a cat playing, or a fox, or something like that.
Right.
What is our relationship to animals? I mean, is there anything in particular that we should be thinking of when we're relating to animals?
Yeah, so animals, they have souls. Number one, they are here to experience planet Earth, whether they chose to come in as a deer or a fox or a whale or whatever it is at this
Mhm.
point in time. They actually have free will to be here too. So no animal is sentenced to planet Earth. It is a soul that is chosen to come here. So our relationship with them should be very respectful. I mean, respectful like we would a human, whether it's
Yeah.
a wild animal or your pet dog or whatever this is. And I will say this, animals are very telepathic. So even animals in nature, you can communicate by sending them visual ideas of what you're thinking, or sending them the energy frequency of love, and
Yeah.
they will respond almost immediately to that.
I tried to just send visuals to our cat.
Hmm.
Like, what happened? You used to sleep on our laps and now you don't. Like
Yeah.
like, what's going on here? I don't think I've gotten through to her yet, but, um, I honestly, I think it might be because we moved so many times within a short period of time. I think that
Hmm.
might have caused some sort of sense of unsettledness.
Hmm.
Um, so I think we're trying to work through that. But you mentioned entities earlier. So have you seen anything like extraterrestrials or that sort of thing?
So I haven't actually seen them, but I have
Mhm.
felt their energy. So I do truly believe they exist. And I believe that they will be well known here on planet Earth within the next few years. I don't think we're decades away from that becoming well known.
That falls a little bit in line with there's this whole ongoing push for just UAP UFO disclosure. I've always thought we're probably looking at about 5 years from now.
Mhm.
Maybe a few years from now, things will start really rolling. But right now, I see evidence of the intelligence community and whoever else is in the know, private industry probably, really pushing back on the efforts that have occurred over the past 5 years. And so that's why I'm thinking more of like the 5 year timeline. Do you think that would be a good thing if we are fully aware that, oh my gosh.
I think so. I think there's going to be some challenges for humanity with that. So people who are really concrete in their belief of their religion that might say we are the top of the food chain, the most
Mhm.
intelligent creatures in the universe, might be a little shocked when we find out we're not. So I think there is some reason why that will be challenging. Also, I was just thinking about this the other day, the divide that COVID brought. You wear a mask, you're not wearing a mask,
Yeah.
right? That was something, it was still human and human. We were just talking mask to mask, right?
Yeah.
Or no
Yeah.
mask. So when we're talking about a whole nother species, which I do believe there are species of them on our planet already, but it becoming public or being made known, there is going to be some division and some pushback and fear.
Yeah. So instead of leaving it on fear,
Right.
if you could leave us with any thought that you choose, what would it be?
It would be to remember that we always have free will. So you had free will on a soul level and you chose to be here, and you have free will on a human level, which is to choose how you want to see your experience. So instead of choosing it from a place of fear, choose it from a place of love, from a place of gratitude, and being able to use these lessons to move forward in your life and to help other people.
Beautiful. Michelle, where can people find out more about you?
At my website, MichelleClare.net.
All right, great. So everyone, please check out Michelle's website. Michelle, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it too.
Okay, great. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions for me, you can always email me at paranormalnow@aol.com, or you can message me on Instagram. That's at paranormalnow. I'll see you all soon. Actually, next week we have a special show on the Coffee and UFOs podcast discussing UAP UFO disclosure, and my light behind me is blinking like crazy right now. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's Michelle's energy. We'll see. Anyway, thank you all. Stay tuned. More to come. I appreciate you. And always, this program is rebroadcast on the UnX network. So check it out there with all the other amazing shows. Until next time, peace and love, and live in the mystery.